Guys, how's it going? Welcome back. So it looks like our project is coming to its completion stage finally. I'm still waiting for stuff to come in on an order for my LED stuff, but I did get the white lights in finally, and I ended up going to the source to buy these same chrome casings. They do carry them in a pack of 2. They're kind of expensive, but you know, I'm still waiting for the order, like I said. So once I get them, and I don't have to buy them at the source again, because that kind of hurt. But anyhow, I've put extra long wires on my LED for my headlight. I've also put heat shrink tubing around them too to help with wear factor and a lot of bending. And you know, these fine cases will eventually split around the wires. You know, it does happen someday, but so I figured, get ahead of the game. The extra long wire idea is to give me the ability to take the hood on and off and work on the helicopter, because when I hook this in, it's going to be like, you know, all soldered in, and you know, I don't want to have to desolder stuff. So if I ever do have to change the LED bulb, I can actually do that because I'll have the extra long wire, so I'll have the maneuverability to do that. But anyhow, so we're going to cut into 4 wires on this plug, and that's where I wanted to show you guys how to wire in a switch, but also the switch and the headlight together into a 4-wire plug-in. So you got to trace down, obviously, which lights they are. So turn your power on your helicopter, get your lights going, and now in this case we know on this helicopter it's this plug. Okay, so we know that's it. Fine, let's plug it back in. You're going to want to leave this plugged into the board. Turn your power off, but also unplug your battery. Do not leave the battery plugged in for doing this, because you're working on the board while it's still plugged in. So we've already got our wires stripped at this end, we've got them stripped at the LED end, and so now we got to divide our 2 positives and 2 negatives. Now the other thing we got to do is make sure that positive is actually positive, negative is actually negative. And you can find that out by using a meter tester, but we're going to cut the casings and then we're going to tie them, and we're going to check them first, because some helicopters positive is negative and negative is positive. So when you hook in an LED that I know this red area is definitely positive, if you hook it up backwards you fry the LED. So you want to make sure you got everything set right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to cut in right about here. And what I do is I usually take a lighter, because it's a lot easier, especially when you're working in a small spot. You don't want to tug too much on those casings with a set of wire cutters. I'm just going to heat up the end of the casing. Okay, now we're going to do the same with the upper positives here. And you're going to twist these wires together, just like so. And you're going to do the same down here. Take one side of your switch wire to your positive. It doesn't matter if you go off the positive or the negatives with your switch. Now the other end of this is going to end up over here. We're not going to connect that yet. So the next thing we want to do is we want to get our negatives. So I'm going to cut them just a little bit longer near the connector. Now this is where you can actually take the connector out for a minute anyway. Get this part done. And then we tie our two negatives together. Now before we do those, we're going to do a voltage test. And we're going to check our polarities to make sure positive is positive, negative is negative. Let's just get that in there. Now this is where you can plug the power back into your helicopter. Turn your power on. Now this time your lights are not going to go on. And negative. So this is actually opposite. So in this case, the negative wire is actually positive. So negative is positive. So we're going to make a little note here. Negative is positive. Positive is negative. Okay, this is very important to make sure that your polarities are right. So, our positive from our headlight, just going to shut that down, turn that off. So our positive from our headlight is going to go to the black wire on our connector. Oop, that didn't twist around quite right. This is going to be interesting. Okay, let's get our negatives, or positives apparently, hooked in. Now you may find that this is going to be a bit of a lengthy video, but if you want to figure out how to do this and you've never done it before, it's worthwhile watching. Okay, so those two negatives are tied together. One half of our switch is tied together. Now we got to be able to feed power to this throughout, so we have to still control it by the switch. That's where it gets to be a little interesting. I think we're going to have to get these soldered. Okay, so let's tin the wires up on this before we go too much further. Now, for those of you who haven't tinned wires before, you got to do this properly, and you need soldering flux paste in order to do this. Now if you don't use soldering paste, you can burn your wires and wreck them, and that just wouldn't be cool. Alright, now if you get a little bit of extra flux there, just wipe it off with your fingers there. So now we're going to plug this back in. Make sure your helicopter power is unplugged. This is just going to make things a little bit more stable to work with. So we're going up through here, and we want to tie into here. Now our LED has to tie in to our switch as well. So just so let's unhook the switch, make sure it's unhooked. Okay, switch is unhooked. Now, our red is now going on to our black. And black is now going to red. Now that would leave them turned on all the time. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little bit longer wire for each, just to save some mess. So we'll get some wire out here. Black wire too. I'm not going to add very much length, just a little bit. Just gives a little bit more room to maneuver things around. Oop. Alright. Turn our soldering iron back on. Now the LED that I'm using is actually 3.7 volts, and there's over 7 volts going through this LED, so there's actually a resistor on my LED to reduce the voltage enough so it doesn't pop the LED. Solder on there. And we want to make sure we keep our color codes the same on our lights to these wires, even though we know everything's backwards for the LED on the headlight. We want to keep everything else hooked the same way because it's the way it's wired. Okay. Okay, now we're going to need some heat shrink tubing. So we can use this thinner stuff. Go. Goes over there. Okay, so that's still positive, that's still negative, but of course we know they're flipped. So let's disconnect our LED light. Now if you didn't write it down, recheck. Power on. That's my back ones. Now, black should be positive and red should be negative. Oh, wrong wires. These ones. Okay. .7 volts. Good to go. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to take a little break and I'll be right back. Okay guys, let's continue on. So, if you didn't write it down, you can always check your voltage again. Now, what I've done is I plugged it back in, I'm just checking to make sure all my wiring contacts are good. So I'm just gonna touch this to here, and we got power still to our lights, so we're all good to go there. So turn it off, unplug it. So we got to decide which side we're going to put the switch on. Well, I'm going to put the switch off the positive side. Not that it really makes a huge massive difference, but I got to make sure that I remember, of course, and I did write it down, that the red positive here is actually my negative. So I got to take my blue wire, and it's going to connect right into here. I've got my black over on this side. Now my red is also now my black, of course. And we're going to hook that in. Now, we haven't put the switch in place yet. But we want to make sure... Whoop, I guess I'm going to have to make this wire a little bit longer. Alright, now that's tied in. This can start to look like a rat nest after a while. Anyhow. Okay, so now we got that tied in. We're going to just tie this in temporarily, just to make sure all of our lights come on. And we're going to make sure nothing's touching. Looks like we're all good. So we can plug this in, and we'll turn the power on. And we do have power to our LED. And our lights are going, both sides, rock and roll. Okay, now we can unplug this. So, next thing we want to do is solder the wires together on the one side first, and then put our heat shrink tube on. This way we know this side is done. We're going to leave our switch side disconnected. So this is all the stuff in here that's going to be reconnected. Now, because I re-bared the wire a bit, I'm going to have to put some paste on there again. This time I think I'm going to use a Q-tip. And let's fire up our soldering iron. Let's see if we can clean our tip off a little bit here. Alright, and get our solder out. Let that heat up a little bit more. Okay, so now we're gonna slide some heat shrink tubing. Yeah, so take a piece of this heat shrink tubing. I'm just gonna slide that right in like so. Try and gather up as much of the wire as we can. that out of the way. So now comes our switch. And we can cut a little bit of extra wire off the switch just to shorten things up a little. Okay. Now, while that's heating up, if you want to make sure everything's wired right, plug your power in, turn the switch on, the back light runs, front lights are running. We got light. So, unplug the power now. Now, nip this little sharp edge off. There we go. They're nice and secure. Now, we can use this stuff. Maybe a little on the thick side. This is going to have to use the thicker stuff. Now, let's plug her in. Got a headlight, got sides, all good. Got our tail boom lights. So, that's the wiring job completed. Now what you got to do is try and organize some of this stuff. And if you can, zip lock it. We do have some. You want to try and keep your wires as neat as you can too. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the battery holder. Right at the back end of it. Off. Now these excess little pieces here above, that's going to stop anything from shorting out. Okay, so you won't have to worry about that if you do it up that way. And you can do it other ways too, there's more than one way to do this. So the next thing we want to do is feed all this wire inside our canopy. And plug our power in. And there's our helicopter with the canopy on, our wires all buried inside, everything's good. Now this switch is going to control our sides and our front. And then this switch, of course, controls our tail boom lights. So this way, if you want to not run lights during the daytime, save on a little bit of battery juice perhaps, good way of doing this. And it doesn't really save a lot of battery power, but it does kind of make it nice, because lights during the daytime flying, kind of useless. At night, looks cool. And the headlight, of course, is going to be really bonus. So we're going to go a little bit more into the video just to put the blades on here, and you'll see the entire completed project. So just give me a minute and I'll be right back. Guys, so now we're going to put the blades back on the helicopter. Now the STSW E2012, which this is what this bad boy is, the SO31, SO31G, there's a difference between your bottom blade grips and your top. The top actually use some little tiny brass bushings, okay? And you're gonna not want to lose those. So you got to figure out, of course, again, if you didn't mark it, your A blades and your B blades. So if you've got another helicopter handy that you can grab, you just take a look at it, and A's are on the top, B's are on the bottom. And I didn't write it down, so we're going to start with our B blades. Now you got to make sure these screws that are closest on the blade grip are also up a couple of turns, because you're going to need that flex area. The bottom blades do not use brass bushings. Okay, there's a pin built in. I don't know why they didn't just do it to the top as well, but so once you get your screw out, just carefully pry up and wiggle it, and it'll pop in there. So before you put the blade grip screw back in for the blade, tighten these back down. You just go until they stop, and just a little bit of snug, and that's all you do. Okay? There's no need to refund these things. And make sure the screwdriver that you're using is as perfect a size as you can get for these screws. Now these are also a Phillips head screw. Now your blade grip screws on the bottom, you can tighten these up pretty snug, but don't overdo it, because you still want them to have some fairly free run there, just like so. Now we'll go to our other side. This is our other B. Same deal. Now, a lot of guys will tell you to have your blade set as tight as you can because of blade tracking and stuff. On these type of coaxials, especially the lower end stuff, blade tracking is important to a degree, okay? These blades, especially on this helicopter, even if you tighten the hell out of this screw, you're not going to make the blades stop. And you want them to have free run, especially when they hit something. You want them to be able to flip so that it doesn't do damage, okay, or minimizes the amount of damage that happens. So you want some kind of movement there. But because they won't tighten down, like really stiff, you do have to kind of take your best guess by feel, by flipping them back and forth to see if they're about the same. And you'll know. And when you try checking the blades later, you can track them a bit and see what's going on with them. And you know, if you have to make this one just a little bit tighter just to make sure everything's even, well, that's fine. But it's not a, how do you say, it's not life or death to the helicopter, okay? So now we're going to take our brass bushings out because we're going to need these. Like I said, don't lose them. I haven't found anywhere where I can get them yet, but I'm still working on that. Now put your finger underneath the hole, put your bushing in, grab your screw, get that in there, and then just line it up. And your screw should just drop right into the hole there. Now, because there's bushings in this one, these will lock down on the top. So initially just set them up just like that. We'll get to the tension thing there in a second. Now, you don't want them to run too loose either, because that can cause blade slap. And that's one thing you might want to try and avoid. And doesn't mean you're not going to get blade slap happen either if they are set right, but less chance. Okay. So I like to try and set mine as close as I can to all four of them being about the same, at least initially. And you should always check all your screws, including your blade screws, before and after every flight. And if you have one blade that is too tight and one that's running too loose, that's going to cause some flight issues too. And that seems to be okay. So, juice is still plugged in. So we have our headlight. I'm actually going to try and make it dark in here just to show you how this thing lights up. Okay, so we'll turn on our back tail boom first. Now our front, sides, and our headlight. My battery is a little low, but there's enough power to do this. And see if I get you a good visual of that headlight. There you go, there's our headlight. So it's going to look pretty cool at night. So I can give you a bit of a side view here. Oop. So now if I don't want my tail boom on, I can just turn it off. You know, or if I want my sides and headlight off and just my tail boom on, I can do that too. Okay, let's turn the lights back on. So this project's taken a little while to get done. It's a lot of fun. Actually, what I think I'll do is put my helicopter over here. There we go. Get some light on the subject. So I've got some cool skull heads that are actually on the sides here. I'll turn the heli a bit here. And of course on the front of the canopy. Now this black stuff is actually pinstriping. I painted the whole blade yellow and did pinstriping on the tops. And then our tail section has a pirate girl that has a skull and crossbone on her head too, which is really kind of neat. So overall, it's a fun project, really liked it. Next is to wait until all the snow's gone and I can fly this bird. Now the other mod I did to this was the tail blade. I put on the tail blade from the SO-33 SEMA helicopter because it's bigger, it provides more wind, and it's the exact same mounting system. So you just use your screw that came with your tail blade that was on here from the factory. So now your low speed and your high speed flights will be a lot better because now you're able to create more wind. Now I know there's a lot of guys doing mods out there, adding extensions onto their tail blades. I've tried it, I've caused more damage than good myself. But you only need so much wind, and if you start adding too much extra length and weight, you're going to start making your helicopter tail heavy. Then you got to fix up the nose piece and make it nose heavy again to rebalance it. Now I've found that with this blade it doesn't matter. It's not adding that much extra weight that the helicopter even will notice, and it's going to provide a lot more wind. So basically it pretty much maximizes this heli for what it is without getting into a lot of major modifications. And who the heck wants to do that, you know, on an inexpensive helicopter? But even just giving it a nice paint job, you know, some nice graphics, add on the tail blade, it makes it a pretty unique machine in the end. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple seconds break and I'll come back with a final piece, and I'm going to actually show you this one and my other one side by side, because I've done actually 3, but I'm going to have to add the slideshow portion to the third one, which is one I actually did for a buddy of mine. So we'll be right back. Okay guys, so we're back, and so these are my 2 own helicopters right now that I've done. Of course, we know the yellow one is pretty decked out, got a headlight on it, got some switches. This blue and white version is just a total repaint, added on the SO-33 tail blade to it, and some graphics. And in case you didn't see that video, I got these skeleton guys on motorcycles, one on each side of the canopy, my snake there, and at the back end we've got a sword with a skull and crossbone on it. So some different unique stuff. Now a guy had asked me about, you know, painting helicopter blades because it's not a perfect surface when you're taping off the blades like I did on the blue to the black. I left the original black blade the same. There's really not going to be any difference in performance, at least on these things for sure. But I mean, if you take a look at a helicopter, like a Blade SR for instance, or a Huey, they have wooden blades and there's a covering on them. I'm just going to actually show you one here, just so you can see. I'm just going to zoom this right out. But this stuff is really thick on here, you know, and so really it's not going to affect it on a 6-channel 3D helicopter to have that extra weight of that shrink wrap stuff or whatever the hell it is they're using on this. But I mean, even the weight of this from the thickness, you know, whether you spread it all the way out or have some spots where I did, it's not going to make a difference in my opinion. But I mean, I've never painted blades on a 6-channel heli, so I don't know how it would react. But, you know, so I can't say 100% for sure. But I have flown these painted and I've had no problems. So I'm not going to be concerned about a little bit of paint on the blades. So, but otherwise, that's the end of our little painting and lighting projects for now. And hope you guys learned a lot, especially out of the wiring job and how to wire that switch in with extra lightings, never mind the original lighting. And you know, so if you've never done that kind of wiring before, you know, it gets a little bit of a rat nest when you get a lot of wires in there. So you got to keep track of things. But the big important thing is to check the polarity. Just because it says red is red and black is black, it ain't so in a lot of helicopters. You know, red is actually black and black is actually red. So if you want to avoid popping LEDs and stuff, then pay very close attention. Make sure you have a digital multimeter so you can tell if it's forward or reverse voltage on it, so you know which way to change your wiring around for your additional pieces. So anyway, that's about it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next video.